Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yay. It's been a minute. For me, anyway. How is everyone? No one's talking. Good, good. All right. Well, we don't have, first of all, welcome to Broker Chat. I'm Deborah Blue. I'm the managing broker in the Midtown office. We also have Tom Fulkerson, who is our qualifying broker. And this is called Broker Chat for those of you that are new to the Zoom. And we are live, it looks like on Facebook, I see here. I think that's right, Nayala. And we are also recording this. So if there's something that is discussed here today that you didn't quite get and you want to listen to it again, it will probably be posted either on our Facebook page or some other place. So let's begin by talking about your needs. The purpose of Broker Chat, we will either have a topic that we are running into quite a bit and we discuss, or we open it up for your questions to help you out in this crazy, crazy, wonderful market we call real estate. So I will open the floor to the first person who would like to ask a question. Because if you don't, I've got some answers. All right.
I'll throw something out there for you, Deborah.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. So how many of you guys are having issues with special stipulations regarding writing a special stip that says the buyer will pay X amount over the appraised value?
Good one, Tom. That's happening a lot for me as well.
It is happening a lot. And it's presenting a problem because either the listing agent or the buying agent are not putting either a cap or a floor on the number. So what has transpired, and Deborah, you can chime in on this, I'm sure you're having the same issue, is that the appraised comes in way below what the seller is anticipating, and the buyer is willing to pay $5,000 over that appraised value, and the seller doesn't want to sell it for that price.
Yeah, we've had this several times in our market center. One of the things that I want to share is that there has been a court case that set precedent for these type of special stips that are written poorly in favor of the buyer and the seller having to sell their home. And the reason being is when I teach contracts, I've always taught everyone from the very beginning, what, when, where, how, and what happens if. When you read that special stip, if it doesn't answer all those questions, you probably left a loophole open for the buyer or the seller. So in the example that Tom just gave, one of the things that should be added on there, and some of the listing agents are trying to say, well, we want to exercise paragraph 11 now, talking about the appraisal that it didn't appraise, so the seller can choose to not sell it. We still have to send the ATSP over, but the seller doesn't, that special stip has to say a cap, or you as the listing agent need to read that and say, oh, okay, that's fine. However, if this happens, we are still going to exercise paragraph 11. You see how we've closed that loop now? That gives your seller an opportunity to say, hey, that 5,000 over ask would have been great, but it didn't appraise. So now I'd like to go back to paragraph 11. According to the courts, they're still going to, if it goes to court, I should say, they are disagreeing with that paragraph 11. If you write a special stip saying, I will pay you 5,000 over whatever it is. And most of you are putting appraised value that are buyers. That's great, do that. But if that buyer doesn't have the gap between the appraisal and the amount, the seller can't force them to go away. They can't force them away because it's the way you guys are writing it, not you guys, because you guys are you're the VIP group here. It's all the others. Questions about that?
I will say it's becoming a bigger problem because now we've got pending lawsuits that are getting ready to go to court because the buyer's adamant that they want to buy the property and the seller's like, I'm not selling it for that price. Now, interestingly enough, I've had conversations with other brokers from other companies that I have a whole lot of respect for. And they say that that stip is not enforceable because the seller didn't agree to sell it for that price. I'm like, well, the seller agreed to the language and signed the contract. To me, that's enforceable. But I just want you all to know there's some confusion about that. And depending on who's holding your earnest money, it may or may not fly. But please, I don't care if you're representing the buyer or the seller, put a ceiling and put a cap and a floor on that appraisal just to prevent yourself from going through a lot of aggravation at the end of the day. Because it's all good and fine if it appraises low, but if you get into a dispute with the seller and the seller refuses to close, then you're really nowhere.
Absolutely. And because we already have, like I said before, in the state of Georgia, a court case in reference to this, unless there's some other extenuating circumstances, more than likely that seller is going to lose. And the seller's not going to be happy with you. They're not going to be happy with, even though they agreed to it, we all know they're not going to be happy with the agent and everyone around that, the company and everything, because it's not being explained. So I highly, highly advise that when you have, as a matter of fact, when I get an offer, I don't even look at the first page first. I look at the special steps because that's where all the bones are hidden. Okay, that's all great that you gave me a full price offer, but I know the real story is on the special step page of what you want. And so I don't know why I do that. I just know that I go right to that page to see, oh yeah, offered for full price, but you want all these other things that makes the full price just not so shiny anymore. So pay attention to that special step page. Any questions about that? Anyone on the call, on the Zoom, run into something like that?
I'm driving, but you know I have.
Yes, Willie. Now, I did not call you out, so you're more than welcome to share.
Yes, so I am actively, well, my client is actively involved in litigation for that very reason. I represent the buyer, and we put the special stip in with the offer that was countered. The seller's agent kept the stip when they countered. Standard verbiage that we've used, the seller, agrees, something of that basically the buyer will pay $25,000 above the appraisal price, not to exceed X amount.
Right.
The seller, all they saw was, this is the amount.
25,000 is what they saw.
They saw that top number. And so appraisal comes back. We're like, okay, it came back much lower than what they listed it for. But with the 25,000, we were in agreement. My client understood, okay, cool. So we add 25,000 to the appraisal, shoot it over, let's go. We're ready to close. And the seller was like, absolutely not. We want more money. And so, it has been, to your point, with brokers and even with the earnest money, my buyer did get the earnest money. That the closing attorney looked at the language and said, well, yeah, and looked at the subsequent emails and everything that was submitted. And as Deborah said, there was precedent. My clients absolutely wanted the house, still want the house. And there was precedent for the case before with the same language that I had. And so it has been an uphill battle, because for anybody who has to go through, I hope you don't have to go through that situation. It is very costly to go that route. And my client has already spent $10,000, and there's no end in sight because the seller isn't budging, my buyer isn't backing down. And so it has been a nightmare. But yeah, actively involved in that.
And I'm helping Willie with this situation, and the buyer has been very generous in offering, stay a little longer so you can find something. So it hasn't been this, you have to get out and I own this. The buyer has been very gracious, but I will tell you, the buyers are getting savvier. They've got a little bit deeper pockets. They are willing to, and they've been looking for a year, 2 years. And so to have something like this happen, there are some buyers now that are digging in their heels saying, let's go to court. So our job is to try to keep that from happening as agents. But if your seller is not, if you're not sitting in a listing appointment saying, if this should happen, and by the way, if we should get this type of special stip, how would you like to handle that? So that you don't even run into this situation. And it has always been, from us learning from pre-license, pre-written, handwritten, special stip takes precedent over other things. I think we've all forgotten that. And this new 2020 contract has spelled it out again, because we have forgotten that if you start writing special stips and it's already in the contract, you may be rewriting the contract by adding that special stip. So just know that when you put something in there, I know your intention might be, I just want to make it very clear, but you're making something very clear could be muddling something else. Does that make sense to what I'm saying? Because everyone understands that a special stip takes precedent over any pre-written situation. And Barbara, go ahead and say that out loud.
Or you may, by writing that special stipulation, you may void out something in the contract that you're not intending to void out of the contract.
And in the example of what Willie is talking about, basically that paragraph 11 was voided out a little bit because it said, you will accept $25,000 over the appraised value. You didn't say, oh, but if it doesn't appraise, I will not accept that. You see, so for those of you that may not want to ask the question and may be a little confused of what we're talking about, that is what we're talking about. You could run the risk of voiding something that's already been written by an attorney. We are not attorneys. We fill in blanks, although we use lazy language that we're writing contracts. We're writing offers. No, we're filling in blanks of a contract that was written by an attorney. Okay.
And Deborah, to that point, by having that stip, it also voided out the loan contingency and the appraisal contingency, because we had already agreed per the attorney on what it was going to be. So that out that the seller has in the loan contingency was not in effect because of that special stip, which was another issue.
Yeah.
The sellers thought that they still had an out and that they could say, no, we don't want to accept that, but that was not in there.
Yeah. And remember, for those of you in Midtown, when I teach the contracts and I say law and law, we have our little bubble, our real estate bubble of law. But once we step out of that bubble to attorneys and real court, then they interpret our contracts sometimes a little bit different than how we're taught. So that's the other thing too. Don't put yourself in a situation to say, no, this is law, this is this, because if it turns into a lawsuit with attorneys and judges, certain things that we think should have gone one way, that judge could wake up, look at that contract, look at the scenario and say, nope, I'm going the other direction. And you have to abide by that.
Yeah, can I make a point to that, Deborah? We have gone, I was involved in 2 court cases regarding commission in the last 2 weeks. And the judge, the last scenario, the judge agreed that we were entitled to our commission, which was about $16,000. The award was for $888. Okay, so I'm not sure of the rationale there, but he agreed to pay $888 of the commission, $1,000 for attorney fees, and one other small amount for something else. But to your point, sometimes if you go to court, even if you are in the right, you may or may not be made whole. Okay, so I just want to caution. In this instance, the attorney fees outweighed the award that was awarded by the judge.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've had to, not me physically, but our previous qualifying broker had to go to court, but I was involved with when it became a problem. And then once it escalated and it's handed off, same thing, agent thought they were going to get their commission. It went the other way. Everything, paperwork, everything was correct. And the seller was in the wrong. However, when we went to court, we got nothing. And that was because the judge decided on that. So just keep that in mind. And with saying that, I want you guys to be really careful about saying, we'll sue and so on and so forth. I get lots of calls where people ask me, well, what can we do? There comes a time, we are realtors, we are not attorneys, we are not accountants, sometimes we're therapists. But at the end of the day, when we reach that gray line and you have to step over it and you start to give out legal advice, you have to zip it and say, at this point, this is kind of above my pay grade now, we have to bring in an attorney. And that's either going to deter that buyer or seller to say, okay, let's work it out. Or in the case of Willie's situation, the buyer says, let's do it. So you have to be a consultant. Everyone is a consultant on this call. And you have to be able to have the tough conversations. It's fun to tell them they won the listing, or, you've got full price, you've got multiple offers, all that everyone seems to enjoy. What we don't enjoy is when we have to give bad news, and that comes with the territory as well. And instead of looking at it as bad news, look at it as consulting. How do we consult the buyer and the seller and maybe even the co-op agent through this? I don't like to give up on anything until my knuckles slip off the ledge, okay? So you need to reach into your bag of knowledge and talk it through until you cannot talk it through, where you may have to bring your broker into the picture. But before it gets to us, you guys need to really use everything to try to get this deal or situation to work. Barbara, you want to go ahead and unmute and say what you're saying?
Yeah, but before I do that, I noticed that Michelle Pleasant has had her hand up for a minute, so you might want to ask her question first.
I didn't see it. Go ahead, Michelle.
It's a question about the next subject I want to bring up. So Barbara, go ahead and ask your question. And when we go to the next question, I'll ask my question.
Thank you,
Barbara.
Okay, I was just wondering if, we have the platform where when there are disputes, we can file with the Georgia Association of Realtors. So before going to court, I just wonder if it has been suggested, or even if they take the route of going to GAR before going to court.
Yes, that's a great point. So all of us are members of NAR, GAR, and of course your local board. Under GAR, if you go under legal, there are two things you can do under GAR. All of us have a NERDS number, NRDS, we call that NERDS. You received that when you took your oath and got your realtor code of ethics done and all that good stuff. What happens is you could go on there to do two things. You can ask Seth Wiseman, who is one of the co-writers of our contract and also of the Red Book, and he can answer your questions. Now, Seth is very busy. He's not answering your questions instantaneously. So if you want to type that information in, eventually he will answer that question. If it's something you need right away, you probably want to go to your broker. But if it's something that's burning in your mind and you're just curious, when you do that, do not use any names, do not use any broker names, just give them the facts. Okay, that's it. I wanted to know if buyer A and seller B, blah, 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 blah. That's how you should write it. You don't say, my seller, Susie, and the co-op agent with Caldwell Banker. He won't answer that. He'll send it back to you and tell you, you need to clean that up, and then he will respond to it. That's for liability and legal reasons. That's the first thing. The second thing that Barbara's talking about is arbitration and mediation. And, as I just said, dig into your bag of knowledge and tricks. I've had to go to Barbara as well as go to GAR to see if a scenario we had, could we use that? That's primarily for us when we have a dispute, not when your buyer or seller has a dispute, because that they have to hire an attorney. When people ask the question, why am I paying my board dues? You have a lot of things that are covered with that board dues that cost you nothing, but can save your neck, whether it be marketing, whether it be legal, whether it be just newsletters, things of that nature to help enrich your business. So if you should have a dispute with someone about a commission, you could go to mediation or arbitration, and the forms are on the GAR site for you to download and take a look at it. We won't go into that too much. I think I've done that before in another broker chat, but thank you, Barbara, for bringing that up, because I think some agents don't realize, well, what can I do? They call the broker. You want us to strong arm that person, but sometimes you may have to take them to arbitration or mediation. And I think it's a $250 fee, which I believe probably goes to the person who's mediating. And I do want you to know, if you do go that route, the decision is final. Okay. All right. I think we beat that horse to death. Unless anyone has anything else about that subject, let's move on to another topic. Michelle, you want to unmute and go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I have a quick question about permitting. And the question is, if you represent the buyer and there were some additions done to the home, whether it be a deck or there was a shed in the back that was already there, but they did some renovations on the shed. One, would they have to have a permit for that? And two, should I refer the buyer back to that county so that they can contact the permit office to see if the permits were done if the seller does not have that information or the listing agent?
So there's a couple of ways. I'll say yes, you can refer your client back to the county. You also can do some research or direct your client to do some research. When I go on a listing appointment, the first thing I do after putting everything together is I go into, let's just say it's Fulton County. I'll go to Fulton County Tax Assessor. If your listing's in DeKalb, guess what the name is? DeKalb Tax Assessor. If it's in Cobb County, guess what the name is? Cobb County Tax Assessor. And when you go to that site, you can click tax properties, and you can click on it and you can see all the information about your client's home, what they paid for taxes, did they pay their tax bill? And if it's a property that is, say it was built in 1956, there's a section on there, not all counties, that you can click and see if there's a permit. So I'm working with an investor now where we're trying to build a property in Fulton County, and the listing agent said it was permitted. Well, I was able to go online and find the permit, because anybody can tell me it's permitted, and Tom probably can jump in here on this one as well. We have had many situations. I just finished an E&O situation where the buyer was upset about the property with all the repairs that they found once they moved in. It was that buyer regret, and nothing had been permitted, although they were told things had been permitted. So the correct answer, Michelle, is you direct your client to do it. Because when you start going to get that information and it's not correct, guess who's going to get in trouble? But I just want for knowledge for everyone to be able to go and look for themselves and where you would look. But in the event that you do find it, you can still direct your client to say, I did a little research and found it here. Why don't you go in and look? And that way you can dig a little deeper. And most buyers and sellers, they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know how to interpret that information. Well, unless you're an engineer or construction worker or GC or what, you probably don't either. But at the end of the day, that's where you can find that information. And it's best to ask that question of the listing agent so they can ask the seller. Seller could tell you anything, but it's really, we live in a state of buyer beware, and the buyer needs to do their own due diligence.
And I did tell the buyer that they needed to look in the county tax records and where to look for it at so that they could have clarity on it. And I put it in an email and referenced it back to them so that we're not dealing with that situation. So I definitely referred it back to them so it doesn't come back to bite me if it's not
Yeah.
what they thought it was.
Yeah. And also, you can advise your buyers when they do call to find out if something was permitted. You can also tell your buyer, ask them, did they have any infractions? Was, say for instance, they got a cease and desist on plumbing. You might want to know, well, why? All that is, they can tell you that information. Oh, they didn't weld this properly, or the piers, the deck on the back needed to be piered, so we clocked them on that. That will give your buyer ammunition during their due diligence inspection to just check things a little closer and make sure that everything was done correctly to their satisfaction. Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you for that. Christine, you've got your hand up. Go right ahead.
Yes, I have a question. So about an hour ago, I received a call and we talked about this client before, Deborah. They called me, the son and the mother, I'm under contract with them, and he said he doesn't qualify now. He's out of his financing contingency and they want to move on and purchase the property in the mom's name. Now, the closing date is on the 15th, which is a little bit less than 3 weeks. I don't know if my preferred lenders can do it. And the purchase is also contingent, the sale for the sellers on a new home. So I'll have to make the call to the listing agent and see somehow to push it back.
Yeah,
But yeah, my question is probably what could I lean on, because we're out of financing contingency, and yeah, there's not really much I can lean on.
not if you're out of contingency. Just so everyone on the Zoom understands, when you know you're getting close to your contingencies, it is best to, number one, watch that calendar. And if something does come up prior to the end, you can always, we have a GAR form to extend those contingencies as long as all parties agree. I'm not talking about the 8-day unilateral, because you can only use that for 3 reasons. But you can extend financing, appraisal, things of that nature. And there has to be a good enough reason for that, because the seller's going to want to know, well, why do we need to extend? Who are you using now as a lender? If you change lenders, you need to make sure you give them a new pre-qual letter or pre-approval letter. What's outstanding with this new lender? Are they able to use the same appraisal from the other lender if you're already out of that, or do they have to redo the appraisal again? All of those are factors. You don't really have anything in the contract to lean on. And I'm going to say this loosely because I haven't seen the contract, so I'm answering loosely. But if you're out of your contingencies, the only thing you can do is just kill that other co-op agent with kindness and say, I think we can do this. I think and you're okay, I'm sure you're okay with me saying that your scenario is a domino. So it does affect other people. If it's a little bit harder when it's a domino. So a lot of times when it's a domino, we have to offer money, for your inconvenience. We're willing to put some more earnest money up. Does anyone else have any other suggestions that they've used in a scenario like this?
I don't, but I would say that since they're looking at switching the mother, putting the mother on the loan versus the son, you need to get with that loan officer quickly and see if the mother is even going to be able to qualify and to be able to switch it. Because, and keep in mind that even with the request to extend the financing period, the seller does not absolutely have to agree to the extension.
Correct. That's my concern. Like, I'm really trying to think, how can I, work it out with the listing agent?
Deborah said it best, kill them with kindness, and you may have to put a little more money on the table to keep them on the hook.
But you put it for earnest money or on the purchase price?
Well, that's a conversation you have with your buyer, because number one, you want to make sure the buyer has the money, and then explain to them, look, we're out of our contingencies. we're gonna have to kill them with some kindness and maybe some extra money. Would you be willing to do an extra 2,500, 5,000, you know, whatever? We can't answer that on this call because I don't know the buyer's pockets. But the other thing that you may, it could be a simple case of, we'll give you some extra time in the home at no charge. Whatever the case may be, because they're causing the problem in the domino. So you've got to make it worth their while, because that seller may be losing their earnest money, or they may be losing their lock on their loan, or, you know, it all trickles down to the original person in the domino. They may be at the top.
Because that's what the listing agent told me when I asked first. He said their interest rate is will expire if they have to extend, but you can pay money to extend the interest rate. Is
That's
that
right. So what I would do is I would say to that listing agent, look, the buyer still wants to buy, seller still wants to sell. And I say it just like that. That was a script, you guys, because too many times when I get the call, I hear too much I, meaning you guys. You have nothing to do with this unless they're going to have a room in the house for you. The buyer still wants to buy, seller still wants to sell. So could you check with the lender if your lock is going to expire and find out how much is that going to be? It could be $1,500. And you could say, okay, buyer, their lock is going to expire. If we do an amendment to give them an additional $1,500 or $2,000, whatever the number is, then they can use that towards recovering that lock or something like that, or make them whole from having to come out of pocket on the other transaction, something like that. That's just a thought. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And Deborah, before we move on, I wanted to also mention to Michelle, we were talking about those permits a few minutes ago, if I may. I had a situation where there were some work done to the property. It was not permitted, and it wasn't really discovered until the appraiser went out. And therefore, the appraiser was the one who discovered it, and it did kill the contract.
So what type of loan was this? I would ask a couple of questions before saying something about this.
Okay, I believe it was several years ago, but I do believe it was the FHA.
Okay.
And mine is conventional.
Yeah, I figured it was an FHA in your case, Barbara, because VA and FHA are protected a little bit more than a conventional loan. So I could see how that one, there was no penalty, but in a conventional, there is a penalty, you know? So in Michelle's situation, that could become a problem where the buyer is going to be stuck with a house that wasn't permitted if they didn't do their due diligence. And the E&O situation that I had here in the office, the E&O turned down that buyer because why? Georgia is a due diligence buyer beware state, and that agent advised them to have an inspection. That agent gave them the information to look up permits, even brought in their own vendor list to say, you know, here, this person can tell you, person kind of corroborated what was not done, and so on and so forth. Yet the buyer continued to close. And so when they were upset now with Keller Williams, because we have the deeper pockets, instead of going after the seller, they went after us. And I filed the E&O for them, and it was denied. It was denied. You know, I don't know. I mean, we did everything in our power to present evidence and so on and so forth, but the E&O, they're the deciding factor to say, well, you had an opportunity to do this. And I don't know if anybody's had to file E&O. We all pay for it every month, but you probably don't even give it a second thought. E&O means error and omission. And that is if you make an error or you make an omission, and the consumer can file a complaint against you and our company for us to file, just like if you were to be in a car accident and you call the police and you get a police report, and then you file with your insurance, and then who gets to decide if they're going to fix your car or total it or whatever? The insurance company. And if they deny your claim, what happens? You just got to a heap of steel sitting on 285. You got to figure it out. Okay. So just keep in mind that we are in a very aggressive market right now. And the internet and the University of Google has empowered our consumers to find out everything they can when they have made poor decisions sometimes, or quick decisions. And then they look up and go, oh my gosh, this is leaking. Oh, I smell something. Oh, there's mold. No one told me. My agent's at fault. And you might be. I'm not saying that you're not, but most of the time you probably are not. And that's why it's important for you to always turn in all of your paperwork, keep all of your texts, keep all of your emails, and know what process you took to explain every little system, or every little process rather, in your system. And if you don't have that, if you're a newer agent on this call today and you don't have systems or processes, work on those. Because if you ever run into a situation, and I hope you don't, and the broker wants to know, or an attorney wants to know, or they subpoena us for paperwork, things of that nature, and you don't have it, you are leaving yourself flapping in the wind. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
And Deborah, also on that note, and I think Michelle said something about it, one thing that also helped me tremendously in our litigation was the fact that I had paperwork, not only just the contract, but I also had emails where I had emailed the agent, I had emailed the client explaining, even we had a phone conversation. Hey, per our conversation, blah, 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 you're going to do blah, blah, blah. This is what we understand. And that CYA helped tremendously.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing that we as brokers deal with. I think when you guys get really busy, or if you don't have an assistant or a transaction coordinator, and then you run into a problem, for some reason, we have forgotten from pre-license that all offers and all documents must be submitted to the broker. And, over the years that has changed how we submit. When I started in 1996, everything was typed and turned into a box somewhere. But now we do everything electronically, and there's no excuse not to submit those offers, submit the final offer. I know that when we switched to command, it bothered me a little bit because I didn't, before I knew how to use it, I didn't understand, well, where are the offers? If I get a complaint from someone, especially in a market like this, where a buyer believes their offer wasn't submitted, I should be able to go into command and see your offers. So if your offers aren't in there, my offers are all in there. Every time I get an offer, it's in there. When you go into command and you upload those documents, you'll notice it says an offer. And was it accepted or rejected? And I have a list every time I've gotten an offer on that property. So, and what happens is the one that's accepted, that's the one you accept, but all the offers are still there. So some of you are going, oh my God, Rutro, I know, I hear it through the screen. So if you aren't doing that, you should be doing that, because if I get a call, or Tom gets a call, or if you're from a different market center and your broker gets a call, we need to be able to address that person and say, yes, I see the offer here. It looks like it was submitted. I'll talk to the agent to make sure, so on and so forth. And if you're the buyer's agent, we have the new form now to ask for something in writing saying that, I forget, Barbara, help me, the name of that form, but we have that form that says, could you acknowledge that my offer was submitted? It's an acknowledgement form, but I don't think that's the name of it, to acknowledge that offer was made.
Notification of offer.
There you go, notification of offer. So if you feel like you're dealing in a situation that someone is not submitting your offer, then you can always add that form with it. And I would get in the practice of doing that. And I will say, I don't always do it on every offer, but if I feel like there's some funny business going on, or there's multiple offers, then I might add that form. And if you're the listing agent, please respond to that buyer. We should be doing that anyway. We should not have even had to create a form for it, but because so many agents complain about never hearing from the listing agent as to what happened with their offer. And if you're a listing agent, courtesy, courtesy. That person has a client that is relying on them to tell them what's going on. I submitted an offer Friday. Today is Monday. I haven't heard from the agent yet. That's ridiculous. Just even if you don't know, or the seller is busy, or they're out of town, tell me something so I can keep my client informed. It's against our code of ethics, first of all, and standard of practice. So just know that you should be doing that. And no one, I don't think anybody's too busy to text somebody, in 5 seconds, hey, still checking on your offer, we'll let you know. Nothing wrong with that. I do that throughout the entire process. So if that's not your practice, I would encourage you, highly encourage you, because if you do get a complaint and we have to investigate, those are things that come out as well. Well, you know what, the agent never got back to us. They never did that. Then what turned into a buyer seller thing could then also turn into, you have some infractions in this transaction as well. So be very careful with that. All right. Okay. So I don't see any other hands on this one. I want to switch gears to another situation. This is talking to listing agents, which should be everybody on this Zoom. And I was reading this weekend, and we'll talk about fair housing because that's still very, very prevalent in this market as well, unfortunately. But our listing descriptions, I'm going to throw out a couple of words, and you guys tell me whether you think they are against fair housing. Great schools. Walking distance to church. Quiet neighborhood and safe. Walking distance to shopping.
You want us to answer those?
Not yet. I'm going to tell you all of them that I'm thinking in my head, and then we'll open the floor. Master bedroom. Family room. Great backyard for kids. All right. So who wants to go first? Michelle, you're on my screen. You go first.
The family room is not a violation. The master bedroom is not a violation, but when they said safe neighborhood, how do we know it's a safe neighborhood? You would need to refer your clients back to that area police department for them to determine that, because we don't know if it's safe or not, and we shouldn't put that in there. What was the other one? I think you said walking distance to
church.
To church. We shouldn't put that in there because it may be for a person who's in a wheelchair and they can't walk.
What about great schools?
We shouldn't put that in there either. We should send them to greatschool.com and they go and look and see what the ratings are for the schools and call those schools as well. So we shouldn't be discussing that. And you shouldn't necessarily put in the backyard for kids to play, because it may be somebody who doesn't have kids or weren't able to have kids or don't want to be in a neighborhood with kids. So I would say don't put it in there.
Let me throw one more in. It was the other one I couldn't think of. Great views.
Can I answer,
probably
Deborah?
not, because the person probably can't. What if the person couldn't see?
Okay. All right. All right. Willie, you
Which
got
is
your
what-
hand up. Hold that thought, Michelle. Willie, you want to take a stab at it?
Yes, that's one thing. It goes in line with the views. When you keep referencing walking distance to this place and that place, that is discriminating or steering for those who are, as I like to say, able differently, who cannot walk. And so when you say that, you're almost like, well, I'm excluding this group because I'm saying walking.
Yep. Barbara, I'm going to put you on the spot anyway. I want you to say it. And I pick on Barbara because she's on a lot of these committees that I bring up all the time. So Barbara, you want to chime in on that?
Okay, for the most part, I want to say that Michelle answered them correctly for the most part. I was trying to remember them all, but I believe she answered them correctly.
So great schools, fair housing says they would avoid saying that.
Correct.
Because when someone says to you, I want great schools, your response should be, what does that mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because what one person believes is a great school and someone else says that is totally different. How about executive home?
Oh, stay away from that.
I see it still today.
Mm-hmm.
What you're saying is that if you are not someone who is an executive, you can't live in this neighborhood. It's also code for other things. Okay, I won't say it on this because we are being recorded, but but executive home is also one that's a no-no. Walking distance to, whatever you put behind that, let's say you say walking distance, any of that is incorrect, but you might want to say Whole Foods 0.21 miles from property, blah, 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 1 mile from, and then that person can interpret how close it is. We don't have to say you can walk, run, or drive to any of these places, okay? Backyard for kids. Well, there are people that have chosen not to have kids, me, and I have had a large backyard, but that's not what we used it for. We used it for entertaining, okay? And a dog. So you want to make sure that you're not saying certain things, because in your mind, you're writing a marketing description to appeal to who you think would live there. But even the word family is getting really, really dicey, because it's 2022. What does a family look like right now?
It could look like almost anything.
That's right. That's right. It's not just a mother, a father, and 2.5 kids, and a white picket fence and a dog.
That's right.
Right.
So you
I've
have
seen
to be
that his
very
and hers.
careful about saying family, because family looks like a whole lot of things in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of you are on this call going, oh my God, I hate writing descriptions as it is. Now you've just taken every word that I would use in my description. If you don't understand how to write a description, get with your broker. If you have a productivity coach or coach, get with them and have them help you, or let someone else read it, one of your colleagues, to say, read this and see if there's anything in here that I'm maybe saying that I shouldn't say or whatever. Because sometimes when we look at something, it looks good to us, and then you hand it to someone else and go, oh, wait, you can't say that, or don't say that. Or if you have any question about that, always ask. But you could probably pull up 10 houses right now. The biggest thing I'm seeing now, because we have so many people out here doing rehab, is a handyman special. Okay, I've swung a hammer or two, and I am in no way a man, okay? So you see what I'm saying? You've got to be really careful about who you are addressing and who you may be insulting. Now, I don't know that, I personally don't know that people pay a lot of attention to it, but the fact that fair housing is, they're writing articles and they're putting it out there to us, it's happening. So when you read articles or you go to a class and you come to something like this and we're bringing it up, that means our consumers are getting very savvy to the fact that, oh, so you're discriminating against me because I'm a woman and I swing a hammer. You can turn on HGTV and there's tons of women swinging hammers and rehabbing houses. They are not called handymen. Okay, so be very careful with writing those descriptions and some of the language that you're using. If you go to any of the FMLS or Georgia MLS stores, they have books in the store on how to write good listing descriptions. And if you need help with that, I would purchase that and just have it. I bought one a long time ago. It's probably outdated now. But the other thing too, the latest article I read about master bedroom, what they said about that is, it's a regional thing. There may be, our MLS may still be using that as a pull down menu situation. And what the article talked about was maybe moving away from that. I started moving away from it maybe 2 years ago, and I tend to say owner suite or primary suite, en suite, which is the bathroom off the main primary bedroom. So if you don't know those terms, you might want to purchase yourself a little book. They only cost, $5 or $6, and just keep that next to you. You can Google, what are some great words for legal, I keep saying legal description, listing descriptions, and you can print that and just keep that in your arsenal so that you can, the other thing, the reason I got it was I got tired of saying the same words all the time. And so if you have a hard time putting your words together into a description, I would highly suggest that. Does anybody else have something that they use to help with their listing descriptions?
I don't, but I did want to add one more thing, Deborah, if I can, and that is in the descriptions. It has been mentioned here, I know, starting last year with the properties and with all of the surveillance equipment that we have in the properties, that we probably should put a small note in our listings that the equipment is in the house and it's working and we're listening and paying attention. So say your comments till you get outside.
That was another article that I read a couple of weeks ago, but I've read several of those, and I think I've mentioned that on this broker chat a couple of times and in my contract class, that because we live in this world of surveillance, the article actually was about whether you have the right to listen to someone or not. You have the right to watch them. You have the right to have cameras in every area except for private places like bathrooms. But as far as listening to them in the state of Georgia, you're not supposed to.
Right.
So every state is different. In Georgia, you're not supposed to listen, but it's okay to watch. Years ago, when all of the Ring situations started, I always told my clients, I need you to go in and not say anything. Now, before cameras and audio and all of that, yeah, we're in the house and the buyer's talking to me, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to see if they're ready to, lick the granite and rub up against the walls. We know it's time to write an offer. But now I tell them, don't touch anything, don't lick anything. Let's wait until we get back into my car and then you can talk about it. Because that person, and that includes standing right outside the door where there may be a doorbell surveillance, and that person can hear and see everything that you're saying. That includes you as an agent saying, oh my gosh, this place is a dump. Well, you probably don't want to say that. You might think it, but you don't want to say it out loud where that seller may be listening. And if you're working with a seller, then you might want to inform them. I have always put in private remarks, not in the public remarks, the private remarks, to let the agent know this home does have cameras. Okay. Now, I know for a fact that that hasn't always been a courtesy on things that I've looked at, but I've been able to recognize a camera in the house. Not always, but I've seen certain things sitting on a shelf or whatever. That's a camera. Okay. So if you're not familiar with what a camera looks like, it could be hidden in a teddy bear. It could be sitting behind an something on a shelf, like a vase or something like that. So I would just make it a practice in this high-tech world of not having conversations that would give away your buyer's advantage in the home. Just wait until you're out of the home and stand way back from the front door, or get in the car and you two can discuss. If you've driven in 2 different cars, say, you know what, let's just look at all the homes and then we'll stop at Starbucks and sit down and have a coffee and discuss all of the options. Same thing with taking pictures. If I'm going to a home and I set up a showing time, I will say to the listing agent, is it okay for my buyer to take photos? We're going to be looking at 10 houses today. They may get confused. And can they take a picture of, something that's important to them, whether it be the backyard or the kitchen, or, how big are the bedrooms or something like that. So always ask permission. Don't just start pulling out your camera and doing whatever you want to do. And I'm going to say this too, because we're getting close to the top of the hour. If you do not have listings and you preview homes and you take pictures, you do not have permission from the seller or the listing agent to go on Instagram and talk about the listing as though it's yours. You have to get permission from that listing agent. And if you do not have permission, this is a big problem that I'm getting calls from sellers going, why is my house on that agent's Instagram? That's not my agent, or whatever the case, or the agent is having to call asking, why is that up there? That is a no-no. And that's the quickest way for you to get in trouble. So if you're looking at properties and you want to send it to your client or your customer, that's one thing. Putting it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, walking through it like, look at this new listing. It is not your listing. You aren't supposed to do that without permission. So hopefully no one on this Zoom is doing that. And anybody out there in Facebook land, you're not supposed to do that. Any questions or anything anybody wants to add to that? No? Well, we have about 2 minutes, actually 4 minutes. If anybody has anything else, that's all I had today. I wanted this to be more of a Q&A because we usually have something already ready for you guys, but it's been a minute since we've kind of left it open to all of you to have any discussions. Let me check and chat and see.
You're looking in the chat, Deborah. I would like to ask a question. Do you guys generally get the call for action?
We are getting it now. I always received it, and then for some reason it fell off or whatever. I don't know what happened, but there was a recent email that came out and they had some information incorrect. So I got that corrected. So now I am getting those. So what Barbara's talking about, if you want to go ahead and explain what that is, and it'll be coming out to you, and we'll wrap this up with this last thing.
Okay, the reason I brought it up today is because there may be a call to action to go out today. And if at all possible, I'd like for everyone to respond to it. And Deborah, if you get a chance, have the realtors in your office text 30644. Text GA Realtor to that number, 30644.
And GA what now?
GA Realtor.
Okay.
And therefore they'll be set up automatically to receive the call for actions. We do have a call for action that may go out today in regards to I want to say House Bill 1093 in regards to putting some restrictions on areas of rental properties and areas of properties for sale. And so we're trying to stop it because it looks like the bill is saying that if you own a house, they're only going to have rental properties on one side of town and you can buy properties on another side of town. So for instance, when I was sick, if this bill had been active when I was sick, I wouldn't have been able to rent my house out until I was well enough to move back in it. And so we want, as homeowners, we want to have the right to rent our properties if that's what we so desire to do. And that's what this bill is trying to prevent. So we want to send our support behind, this bill, 1093.
Okay, I'll let the office know and they can send out a blast. Again, guys, this is also part of your board dues that we have people lobbying at the Capitol on behalf of homeowners, and most of you are probably homeowners on this call. It's the reason we have homestead, different things like that. When we're busy selling real estate, somebody is busy trying to create some new law that could not work in our benefit as homeowners. And so realtors have a very loud voice. The biggest voice we had, and he's gone now, was Johnny Isaacson, because he was a realtor. He used to own Northside. He just recently passed away, but he was a big voice for homeownership and realtors on the Capitol. And so we need to be very vocal. When the call to action comes to your email, respond to it. And you don't have to do anything but respond. It will automatically put a letter together with your name on it that goes to your congressperson based on where you live, so that they know we do want this or we do not want this, so that they have something to go and say, you know what, the constituents don't want this. So if you say nothing, you can't be upset when these type of things happen. Okay, so be involved And whether you like it or not, you're a realtor, and real estate is big business in every state. So you better have a voice. That's what the RPAC is for. When you pay for that in the Realtor Action, that's what you pay for every time you pay your board dues. All right. So I think this was a great call today. Thank you for everyone who participated, and those of you that didn't have any questions, hopefully picked up some new nuggets. I don't have anything else. I think our next call will not be next Monday, but the following Monday. And by all means, if you have any questions or a topic that you would like us to talk about, send that to either Tom or myself, dblue@kw, and dblue@kw.com, and we will make sure that we will bring that subject matter up. So you guys go out there and sell some real estate, enjoy this beautiful day, and hope to see you guys co-oping soon. Bye.